There comes a moment in life when you stop bleeding from battles you never chose, a moment when you decide, enough. No one gets to control how I feel ever again. And that moment is the birth of your true strength. Because freedom does not begin when the world stops hurting you. Freedom begins when the world loses the ability to hurt you. This is one of the deepest psychological truths about human suffering, and it explains why. Some people collapse under pressure, while others move through life with an unshakable calm. Pain from the outside is never the true source of your suffering. It's only the trigger. The real injury happens inside, in the cracks you haven't healed, the memories you haven't processed, the shadows you haven't acknowledged. Life does not break you by introducing new wounds. It breaks you by pressing against the old ones you continue to carry. Imagine two people hearing the same criticism. One shrugs it off and moves on, while the other spirals into self-doubt. The words were the same, the tone the same, the moment the same. So what created the difference? The first person has healed the part of themselves that once believed they weren't good enough. The second has an inner wound that the criticism directly touched. The pain was not caused by the comment. It was caused by the old insecurity that the comment awakened. The world didn't stab them. It merely pointed to a place where the knife was already buried. This is why emotional triggers are so powerful. The things that upset you the most are not new injuries, they are reminders. They echo childhood moments when you felt unseen, unheard, unloved, abandoned, humiliated, or powerless. These wounds remain in the psyche like dormant volcanoes, waiting for the slightest disturbance to erupt. And because the mind cannot distinguish between past pain and present experience, you react with more intensity than a situation actually deserves. You are not reacting to the external event, you are reacting to the internal memory that event activated. When someone ignores you, it is not their silence that hurts. It is the unresolved fear of being unimportant. When someone disrespects you, it is not the insult that wounds. It is the unhealed belief that you might not be worthy of respect. When someone leaves you, it is not their absence that breaks you. It is the old abandonment you never fully understood or healed. The outer world acts like a mirror. It reflects the inner fractures you have avoided confronting. This understanding becomes a turning point in your life. Instead of trying to control every person, every situation, every relationship, every outcome, you begin looking inward. You stop asking, why are they doing this to me? And start asking, what part of me is still open to being hurt by this? The power dynamic shifts immediately. You go from being a victim of life to an investigator of your own psyche. And in that investigation, you discover that the things you fear the most are not external threats, but internal wounds craving transformation. People often believe the solution is to cut everyone off, build higher walls, trust no one, depend on nothing. But walls do not protect you from wounds. They protect your wounds from being seen. They keep you isolated, defensive, and disconnected from growth. True protection comes not from avoiding life, but from resolving the parts of yourself that life keeps touching. When you heal what is inside, the world loses its ability to harm you. The same insults feel meaningless. The same rejection feels neutral. The same betrayal feels informative rather than devastating. Healing transforms the meaning of events, and therefore transforms your reaction to them. It is also important to remember that the people who hurt you the most are often not malicious, but mirrors. They reflect the parts of you you've ignored. The partner who manipulates you mirrors the part of you that never learned to set boundaries. The friend who takes you for granted mirrors the part of you that doesn't value yourself enough to speak up. The critic who attacks you mirrors the part of you that still doubts your own worth. The world imitates your inner landscape. When you change the landscape, the reflections change with it. Facing your inner wounds is not about reliving old pain or blaming your past. It is about becoming aware of how your past still shapes your reactions today. It is about observing the patterns that repeat. It is about recognizing when your emotions belong to the present moment and when they belong to a younger version of you that never got the chance to express what they felt. Healing comes from awareness, from acceptance, from listening to the part of you that has been waiting to be acknowledged. And once those wounds are confronted, once they are named, felt, understood, and integrated, the external world becomes drastically less threatening. Not because life becomes gentler, but because you become stronger. The same events occur, but they land differently. They no longer enter you through the cracks of unhealed pain, because those cracks no longer exist. When the inner world is whole, the outer world loses its ability to penetrate your peace. This idea goes against everything you were taught about strength, goodness, and self-control. Most people are conditioned to avoid their darker impulses, bury their anger, suppress their desires, deny their jealousy, hide their ambition, and silence the parts of themselves that feel dangerous or unacceptable. They spend their lives trying to be only what is good, only what is acceptable, only what others approve of. Yet, the more they suppress, the more fragmented they become. The more they reject their own nature, the more powerless they feel. And the more they run from the parts they fear, the more those parts end up controlling them from the shadows. The truth is that every trait you fear becoming is not your enemy. It is your shadow asking to be seen. If you fear becoming angry, it means your anger has gone unacknowledged. If you fear becoming cold or distant, it means a part of you has been abandoned emotionally. If you fear becoming selfish, it means you've spent too long giving until you collapsed. Fear does not point to danger. It points to a fragment of yourself that you have not yet integrated. And until you integrate it, it will continue to follow you like a ghost. Think of the person who fears becoming arrogant. They constantly downplay their worth, reject praise, and sabotage opportunities because they believe confidence equates to ego. But beneath that fear lies a part of them that desperately wants to step in their power, speak with authority, and stop apologizing for existing. Their fear is not a warning, it is a sign of untapped potential. Or consider someone who fears becoming aggressive. They avoid confrontation, allow themselves to be disrespected, swallow their truth because they equate assertiveness with harm. Yet their fear reveals a part of them that knows how to protect, how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to stand firm. Their aggression is not meant to destroy, it is meant to defend. But because they never integrate it, they end up being walked over or exploding when the pressure becomes unbearable. Every quality you fear is a quality you have misunderstood. It is a piece of you that was demonized by society, by family, or by your earlier experiences. But suppression does not make you pure. It makes you incomplete. Integration is not about becoming these traits. It is about acknowledging they exist within you. It is about understanding you are capable of far more than the limited version of yourself you present to the world. The parts you fear hold your greatest power, because they are the parts you have not yet learned to use. Your shadow is not a threat. It is a reservoir of strength, creativity, instinct, and authenticity. When you integrate the traits you fear, you gain control over them. When you deny them, they control you. The person who refuses to acknowledge their anger becomes passive-aggressive. The person who denies their ambition becomes bitter. The person who suppresses their desires becomes resentful. The person who avoids conflict becomes filled with silent rage. Suppression does not prevent darkness, it amplifies it. Integration is the opposite. Integration means giving each part of your personality a seat at the table. It means acknowledging your anger without letting it rule you. It means expressing ambition without losing compassion. It means embracing your strength without becoming cruel. It means allowing yourself to want, to feel, to speak, to protect, to lead. When you integrate the part you fear, it transforms into a skill instead of a threat. Integration also brings wholeness. Most people live like fractured beings, only showing acceptable aspects of themselves while battling the rest internally. But when you embrace your shadow, you become complete. You feel grounded instead of insecure, firm instead of fragile, authentic instead of performative. A person who has integrated their fears is impossible to manipulate because they no longer hide from themselves. You cannot shame someone with a trait they have already owned. You cannot control someone with a weakness they have already accepted. You cannot intimidate someone with a darkness they have already explored. Your fear is a compass. It points toward the part of you that holds your inner power. It directs you to the qualities you abandoned to fit in, to be loved, to be safe. These qualities never disappear. They simply wait for your permission to return. And once they do, they bring with them strength you thought you lacked, clarity you thought you lost, and confidence you never knew was possible. Most people believe they are hurt by what others say, do, or fail to do. They blame the situation, the person, the environment, the betrayal, the insult, the disappointment. But the truth is far more internal. What truly hurts you is not the event itself, but your reaction to it. Your reaction is where your power leaks, your peace collapses, and your stability dissolves. The moment you react without awareness, you hand control of your inner world to the outside world. A single comment can ruin your entire day, not because the comment was powerful, but because your mind allowed it to take root. A moment of disrespect can shatter your mood, not because the person had real authority over your worth, but because your reaction interpreted it as personal. Your reaction is the bridge that allows external events to enter your internal state. Without that bridge, nothing gets in. Without that permission, nothing can disturb your peace. Consider two individuals facing the same situation. Someone raises their voice at them. One reacts instantly, heart racing, anger rising, defensiveness exploding. The other stays calm, observes the moment, and responds with clarity instead of emotion. The difference between them is not the situation, it is the quality of their inner world. One is ruled by reflex, the other by awareness. One reacts, the other responds. One leaks power, the other holds it. A reaction is an automatic movement of the ego. It is the unconscious mind taking over, replaying old wounds, fears, and insecurities. When you react, you are not dealing with the present moment, you are dealing with every unhealed moment from your past that resembles it. That is why reactions feel so intense. They are not fresh emotions. They are accumulated emotion. Your reaction reveals where you are still unhealed, where you are still controlled by your past, and where you have not yet taken ownership of your inner life. When someone criticizes you and you react strongly, it reveals not their power but your unresolved self-doubt. When someone rejects you and your world collapses, it reveals not their importance but your lack of emotional grounding. When someone misunderstands you and you feel desperate to explain, it reveals not their confusion but your fear of being invisible. Your reactions are signals pointing toward the parts of yourself that have not yet matured. This is why emotional mastery is not about controlling others, it is about controlling your responses. When you stop reacting automatically, you create a sacred space between stimulus and response. In that space lies your freedom. In that space lies your power. In that space lies the version of you who is not dominated by impulses but guided by intention. Your reaction is also how others determine your strength. People test you, consciously or unconsciously, to see where your boundaries lie. If your reaction is immediate and emotional, you reveal your weak spot. You show where you can be manipulated. You show which buttons can be pushed. But if you respond with awareness, you become unreadable, untouchable, unshakable. Your calm becomes your armor. Your silence becomes your shield. Your stillness becomes your authority. When you master your reactions, you stop taking things personally. You stop living at the mercy of other people's moods. You stop being pulled into conflicts that do not belong to you. You stop investing energy into battles that are beneath your evolution. You begin to observe instead of absorb. You begin to understand instead of react. You begin to choose instead of being dragged by impulse. Internal mastery requires patience and practice. It requires watching your emotional triggers and asking, what inside me is this touching? Why am I giving this situation so much power? What belief is being activated right now? These questions transform reactions into awareness. And awareness transforms fragility into strength. Your real vulnerability has never been other people. Your real vulnerability is the part of you that reacts without reflection, without grounding, without inner stability. When you strengthen that part, when you build emotional discipline, self-control, and internal calm, the world can no longer pierce you in the same way. The same situations arise, but they do not break you. The same words are spoken, but they do not enter you. The same challenges appear, but you stand centered. Your reactions are the gateway to your inner world. And whoever controls that gateway controls you. When you claim that gateway, when you decide that nothing external gets to dictate your internal state, you step into a version of yourself that can no longer be easily shaken, provoked, or weakened. Most of the pain people experience does not come from actual events. It comes from the weight they give to other people's perceptions. The moment your value depends on someone else's approval, you become emotionally fragile. Every opinion becomes a threat. Every rejection feels like a verdict. Every compliment becomes a temporary oxygen supply that you anxiously wait to lose. You move through the world like a guest, waiting for permission to exist confidently. And as long as your worth is borrowed, your peace is borrowed too. From childhood, most people are conditioned to look outward for validation. They are rewarded for being pleasing, compliant, impressive, talented, or easy to love. They are taught directly or indirectly that their value is something granted to them. So they grow into adults who believe the same. If someone loves me, I am worthy. If someone praises me, I am enough. If someone chooses me, I matter. If someone agrees with me, I'm correct. This mindset builds emotional dependence. It builds fragility disguised as kindness. It builds insecurity disguised as humility. And it traps you in a life where your identity is always in someone else's hands. Every time you take someone's approval as proof of your value, you also give them the power to dismantle it. Every time you rely on external affirmation to feel confident, you allow silence, criticism, or indifference to destroy that confidence. Borrowed worth is unstable. It fluctuates with the moods, judgments, and misunderstandings of others. It becomes a currency you constantly chase, constantly protect, constantly fear losing. Pain becomes inevitable because you're not fighting people, you're fighting for the right to feel worthy through their eyes. And anyone who disagrees with you, rejects you, abandons you, misunderstands you, or simply fails to notice you becomes a danger to your self-esteem. This is why the smallest conflict can feel catastrophic. It's why someone's disapproval can keep you awake at night. It's why losing a relationship can feel like losing your identity. If your worth comes from others, others become the keepers of your emotional life. But something profound happens the day you stop borrowing your worth. The moment you decide that your value is inherent, untouched by praise or criticism, you step into a different existence. You shift from dependency to sovereignty. You shift from searching for evidence of your value to embodying it. You stop waiting for someone to give you permission to feel whole. This shift does not mean you become arrogant or closed off. It means you finally understand that your worth is not up for negotiation. It means you treat external opinions as information, not definition. It means you can listen to feedback without collapsing. You can face rejection without losing yourself. You can experience loss without losing your identity. You can stand alone without feeling incomplete. When you no longer borrow your worth, relationships transform. You no longer cling to people who treat you poorly because you no longer believe they have something you need. You no longer chase the emotionally unavailable because you no longer see them as gatekeepers of your value. You no longer tolerate disrespect because you no longer interpret loneliness as failure. Your boundaries become firm, not because you are rigid, but because you finally understand what you deserve. Your voice becomes stronger, not louder, stronger. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop doubting your intuition just because someone disagrees. You stop molding yourself to fit into places that ask you to abandon who you are. You stop performing for acceptance and start living from authenticity. Internal worth is quiet but unshakable. External worth is loud but fragile. When your worth is internal, a compliment feels pleasant but not necessary. A criticism feels informative but not defining. A rejection feels painful but not identity shattering. You become whole, not because life becomes easier, but because you finally stop outsourcing the power to hurt you. This is the real source of emotional freedom. Not isolation, not detachment, not indifference, but self-possession. The moment you decide that your value does not come from admiration, attention, approval, or attachment, the world loses its ability to wound you in the places you once felt weakest. Not because they are cruel or destructive, but because they are whole. They are no longer afraid of the parts of themselves that most people spend their lives avoiding. They have looked into their own shadow and discovered that the traits they once feared, anger, ambition, power, desire, assertiveness, instinct, are not monsters to be locked away, but energies to be understood and integrated. When someone has confronted their darkness, they become impossible to manipulate, intimidate, or control. They have nothing left to hide from themselves, and therefore nothing left for others to use against them. Most people walk through life terrified of their own depth. They avoid conflict because they fear their anger. They avoid ambition because they fear being judged. They avoid boundaries because they fear appearing cold. They avoid speaking truth because they fear confrontation. They suppress their desires because they fear being seen as selfish. They bury their impulses because they fear losing control. This fear makes them easy to harm. Anyone who knows which emotion they're running from can push that button and watch them collapse. But a person who has met their own darkness has no buttons left to push. They know their anger intimately, so no one can provoke them with it. They know their insecurities, so no one can weaponize them. They know their fears, so no one can use those fears as leverage. They have sat with their shadows and walked through their inner storm. So the storms created by other people no longer overwhelm them. They do not crumble under emotional pressure because they have already faced the most intense pressure, the battle with themselves. When someone truly confronts their darkness, they stop fearing their own potential to hurt, destroy, or misstep. This does not make them dangerous to others, it makes them safe within themselves. They no longer suppress their power, they learn to channel it responsibly. A person unaware of their darkness is unpredictable, fragile, reactive. A person who has met their darkness is steady, composed, and deeply grounded. They can choose strength without aggression, boundaries without hostility, confidence without arrogance. The world becomes dangerous for them only when they have not yet discovered their own inner cave where their shadow resides. But once they enter that cave willingly and explore it with honesty, every hidden aspect becomes a source of power rather than fear. They become self-contained, they become self-possessed, they become anchored in a way that cannot be shaken by external chaos. This inner integration also makes them profoundly difficult to harm psychologically. Insults lose their sting because they have already confronted the parts of themselves those insults refer to. Betrayal loses its power because they no longer build their identity around others' loyalty. Manipulation fails because they see through emotional games instantly. Society often expects people to stay unaware, to remain polite, to avoid discomfort, to stay small. But the moment someone decides to explore the sides of themselves that society discourages, they become free from those expectations. Meeting your own darkness teaches you discernment. You can sense others' hidden motives because you have studied your own. You can see through deception because you understand how deception works internally. You can recognize manipulation because you have witnessed the part of yourself capable of manipulating. You can detect danger because you have learned how your own dangerous impulses arise and dissolve. This does not make you paranoid. It makes you perceptive. People who have never explored their darkness often misinterpret this perception as coldness, harshness, or distance, when in truth, it is clarity. A person who has met their darkness is not easily provoked. They do not lash out impulsively. They do not fear being alone. They do not crumble when criticized. They do not cling to relationships out of insecurity. They do not rely on others to define their worth because they know the extremes of their own inner world. They walk through the outer world without fear of losing themselves. This is why they are dangerous to harm, not because they retaliate with destruction, but because they cannot be defeated emotionally. They cannot be controlled through shame because they have already faced the parts of themselves others try to shame. They cannot be broken with rejection because they have already learned to accept their own complexity. They cannot be destabilized with fear because they have already confronted the darkest corners of their mind. A person who has met their darkness does not live in denial. They live in truth. And truth is the most unshakable foundation a human being can stand on. They understand their capacity for both creation and destruction. They know their light because they have walked through their shadow. They know their strength because they have faced their weakness. They know their potential because they have confronted their limits. They move through the world with a presence that cannot be easily rattled, a calm that cannot be easily disrupted, and a stability that cannot be easily threatened.